Welcome to The Next. I'm the host, Jason Jacobs. This is a show that is sorting through the nuances of athlete development, specifically focused on youth sports. I'm coming at it from the perspective of a founder who is exploring building my next company in this area, specifically around a digital platform that can help players and families navigate the athletic journey, but also as a sports dad, since these days it's hard to be a sports parent. There's plenty of areas where there's clear rights and wrongs and it's black and white, but there's a lot of gray area. And I know I struggle with that gray area, and I think a lot of others do as well. So this is a show that sorts through the nuances of athlete development by talking to well-placed experts from a wide range of backgrounds. I bring my intellectual curiosity, ask a lot of questions, and try to inform my worldview and help listeners to do the same. Today's guest is Nathan Bowen. Nathan's the co-founder of Total Package Hockey and TPH Academy, and both of them are super impressive. TPH Academy has, I think he said, 19 academies, and it's going to be 25 by next year. That started in hockey. That's where their roots are, but they're starting to go multi-sport as well. And then Total Package Hockey runs a ton of camps and clinics and tournament teams and prospect teams, and generally, they're just super well placed and have a really interesting perspective on the state of the sport, the state of player development, the do's and the don'ts from an athlete standpoint and from a parent standpoint, and what it takes to stand out and to go far in your journey. We cover all of that and more. It's a really great discussion. Okay, Nathan Bowen, welcome to the show.
Really appreciate it, Jason. Looking forward to this conversation.
I'm psyched and a bit nervous, to be honest. We graduated college around the same time, and I think the exact same time. And when I was playing back at, and I've talked about this in earlier pods. I mean, playing is a generous word because I really didn't have my head screwed on right, and I quit 2 games in a sophomore year, but I played Division III for a little bit, and you guys were like the number one every year, kind of running the table, and so, yeah, it's an honor from that standpoint. But then, you've been working in hockey ever since, and what you've built is incredible. And as I make the rounds, I should also tell you that, your name keeps coming up as someone who's doing it right. So, as a relative newcomer to the business of hockey, kudos for that as well.
I really appreciate the kind words. I think, first and foremost, as you know, having built something, it's never about one person. We've right now we've got an incredible team in place, and over the last 24 years of building out our founding brand in Total Package Hockey, we've just had some incredible people. And in our very first days, we've had Dwayne Blaze, who's now with the Red Wings in a player development role, and Stevie Brer, who has been with the Leafs and the Seattle Kraken in the NHL, and Ryan McCormick, who's been involved in hockey for 20 plus years, as well as playing. So a bunch of us that wound up in hockey hotbed of Huntsville, Alabama, we're just fortunate enough to find each other and find some opportunities to help some young student athletes out.
And we've talked about this a little bit offline, but for benefit of listeners, just talk a little bit about the Total Package Hockey and TPH Academy founding story. Like, did you always, did you know when you were playing, for example, that you were going to make hockey your profession, or did it happen by chance? How did it come about?
Oh, it's a great question. Again, coming down to Huntsville, this was back in 96, so 100 years ago. And no, we loved Huntsville. It was a great spot. We were a Division II program at the time when I first got down, and we had a lot of really great people, great guys, great phenomenal teammates, and head coach at the time was Doug Ross, and he gave us a chance when nobody else would. And what I mean by that is, being Division II, we were kind of like the Panthers way back in the day. Definitely not the Panthers of today that are crushing cups, but back in the 90s when they went in that cup run, and we were kind of like this, just a bunch of different players. We weren't quite good enough at the time to play Division I for one reason or another, and we all got a chance to come together in Huntsville, and we had a lot of great runs and winning a couple of national championships. The program did. And then my junior year, we made the step up to Division One and made a lot of great friends, a lot of great memories. Loved being down in the Southeast, and we just saw these young athletes that were good, really good little hockey players. But it not being a traditional hockey market at the time, a lot of them and their parents were first generation hockey families, and they just didn't quite know, what the next step or what the path was to get to junior hockey, to get to college, and perhaps eventually pro. And one of the players that came to our first camp, the first TPH program was a 2-week summer hockey camp, was Nick Dowd, and he's had an incredible career. Just signed, I think, again with the Washington Capitals, and just a phenomenal young man and great example. We had other players that went on to win Division III national championships at St. Norbert. We had really special group of athletes that first year of the camp that we put on, and we just always really had a passion for helping the kids and helping provide some guidance to the parents with that.
And so you started with the camp, and how did it progress from there, and over what time period? Because, you graduated college in the late 90s, so that was a little while ago.
Yeah, we're going to be celebrating our 24th anniversary coming up here next month. So yeah, it really, the next year it went into a spring program where we brought kids in from all over the Southeast: Nashville, Atlanta, Knoxville, Birmingham, Memphis, obviously Huntsville. And we took them up to a tournament in Toronto, lost almost every game by a couple of touchdowns. And to our surprise, the parents loved it. They'd never been exposed to hockey that level, and they had a great time. So those really were the catalysts. And now we're fortunate enough to run all the day-to-day operations for the Nashville Junior Predators. And so that spring program was the catalyst to actually start Tier 1 hockey here in the Southeast. So, today we manage several youth hockey associations, such as, the Junior Preds, and I believe we'll have about 25 to 26 teams this year. We're actually supporting figure skating as well in Nashville, which is going to be a lot of fun. We put on tournaments, mostly in Nashville, one up in Grand Rapids, one in Huntsville as well. We take prospect teams to different events, whether it's the WSI in Philly or some of the tournament in Chicago. And we've also been super fortunate since the 91 birth year. We've had an entry in the OHL Cup. And so we take draft eligible American players up to that tournament, and that team's headed up by our chief operating officer, Francis Anslow. And we just had a record-setting year. I believe we had 16 of the players on the team drafted in the Ontario Hockey League draft. So that's a piece. We manage a facility in Indy, a rink, and then, we have the, traditional camps and clinics that we also do. So that's, that gets us where the total package hockey is today. And obviously another brand, what we call our multi-sport day academy model, is TPH Academy. We actually have 18 different disciplines that we support through that, predominantly hockey right now, but we just had a young lady, for instance, get a full scholarship to Georgia out of Nashville in equestrian. We've been supporting the Nashville Soccer Club, the MLS Youth Academy in Nashville, for the past 5 school years, and their academics as well. So, obviously the Academy is really just an amazing opportunity for us to have a daily impact on the student athletes and on their families. And Jason, for us, bottom line is our core purpose, whether it's total package hockey or the TPH Academy, is we want to be the world leader in the holistic development of student athletes. And, the second part is big, is we are building and growing the next generation of impact players. And what do we mean by that? I know you know this exactly. You talk about, your background or any of us that have been in sports, and then it doesn't matter if it's as a father or mother or in our jobs or building a business, our career, whatever it is, we want to make sure that the impact that we're having on these young student athletes is something that they'll carry into that next stage of their life once their athletic careers are done.
So my next question, I'm not going to go, I guess, where you think I would go, but you're someone that clearly has had a longstanding passion for the game. I guess one question that jumps to mind is, all the different things that you guys do sound very operational. If you build a business in an area that you love, how do you retain that love when at the end of the day it becomes a grind, just like any other business would be a grind if you were like selling hot dogs or something?
I think it comes, we were talking right before we jumped on the pod here about just what gets you out of bed in the morning, right? And you get excited about things. And, obviously you're dealing with, in our line of business, you're dealing with a lot of tough challenges, a lot of tough conversations, a lot of high expectations. And we take that responsibility very, very seriously. And so sometimes there's some tough days, but at the end of the day, all of us really at TPH, because could choose to do a lot of other things, just have such a deep passion for helping the kids. And again, it could be helping them through a job loss at home or a divorce or just a breakup with their boyfriend or their girlfriend. I mean, it lies so much deeper too than just what happens on the ice, the pitch, or the court. And I think it's just that passion that gets us up every day and gets us excited. And all of a sudden, like as you just saw, the NHL draft just happened. We had 7 student athletes out of TPH Academies that heard their name. Well, there was a heck of a lot more that didn't hear their name, right? And keeping those players motivated, keeping them excited to go to the rink every day, I think is what helps us get through some of the tough times. And it's never ever felt like a job, what we do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's important, especially, I don't know, when you're building something you're really invested in and passionate about, it is hard to ever put it down. And then it's easy to look at people that do look at their work as just a job where they can punch a clock and leave it at the office and be jealous. And there are certainly some benefits that come with that, but I just can't imagine getting up every day and just checking a box. To be honest, I wish I could, because what I'm doing now is a lot harder and more uncertain and less lucrative than if I just went and got a job. But I love it, and I love it, and I want to do it every day. I just need to find a way to do it in an enduring way, right? And I don't know. To me, I get maybe that's the difference between a founder mindset and employee mindset. But I can't imagine doing it any other way. Another question I have is, it seems, I mean, you've got such a wide footprint, and it also seems like many of if you take the academies, for example, they have their own brand, right? So it might be an academy that is branded as that academy, but it's powered by TPH Academy. So how have you balanced building the TPH brand, whether it's on the total package hockey or on the academy side, versus being in the background and supporting those brands? And then same question in terms of who does what, right? Is there a line of demarcation where you stop and where the end brand takes over in terms of what they actually do and own, or do you own the whole thing end to end?
Well, we have, I would say that, and then everything somewhat in between. So for us, it's all about scaling impact, Jason. We're fine if our brand is completely invisible. And if somebody just wants the help and support and to take advantage of, we spent 2 years just researching the academic piece of this, right? Because you and I both know as parents, there's no messing around with education, right? And so we spent 2 years educating that before we opened up our first academy up in Canton, Michigan, in the Detroit area. And we just finished up our 11th school year. So we're more than happy if it's a facility owner or it's a soccer club director or any sports leader that sees the value in bending academics around a passion for whatever the athletic, whatever the sport is. We're here to help. If they think the brand is going to be of benefit, but it's in a secondary role, we're good with that as well. Or if most athletic facilities, as you know, sit empty between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. Monday through Friday during the school year. And that's where a lot of facility owners have recognized, a great opportunity to generate some revenue for their facilities during pretty much empty or down times. And for us, it's an opportunity to get those doors open. And can you imagine if you got to go to school, right, as a sixth grader, and you knew you were going to get to step on the ice every day or hit the court or, get on the field for some work? Like, holy smoke. I would have been up and out of bed and at the front door waiting to go every day. So that's that piece from, from a branding perspective or a relationship or partnership perspective. The key to all of this and being in the service business is how do you scale the quality, right? I always kind of use the analogy. I love Tim Hortons. If, you go to a Tim Hortons in Columbus, Ohio, or you go to a Tim Hortons in Sarnia, Ontario, you get the same coffee, the same honey cruller, right? And so how do you do that in the service business? And so that's really been a key for us. And about 3.5 years ago, we hired a new CEO in Alan Kiso to lead us in scaling. He had a lot of background in scaling medium to smaller sized businesses. We hired our CFO, Aaron Kitchell, who does fantastic work. And I'm a little bit embarrassed. I wish I had hired a CFO about 5 or 10 years prior to that. And our COO, Francis Anslone, who's been with us 8 years now as well, just a game changer, great hockey guy, phenomenal hockey coach. And then we most recently added our chief academic officer in Adam Ewing, and he's got some background in supporting IMG and some other top type of academies from an academic perspective, and a couple of decades of experience, and just a great dude. To answer that piece, we've got a great executive team in place, process, procedures, meeting cadences, things that we have put in place to really support our folks on the ground and our folks that are supporting the student athletes and their families on a daily basis. And I think that's kind of key, right? Is obviously it's first and foremost trying to put things in places that allow our coaches and our mentors or our academic leaders to spend as much time with the kids and their families as possible versus worrying about all these other business process and procedures or other things that take up a lot of their time. We've always, doesn't matter if it's hockey or if it's on the business or academic side, we want our folks spending as much time with the kids and with their families as possible.
So when you determine, because I think, what is it, like 18 academies that you have now? What's the number?
Yeah, we're actually going to hit around 25 in 3 different countries here going into this next school year for the 25-26 school year. Yeah.
So when you look at that expansion path, what do you look for? Is it certain things from a geography perspective? Is it certain things from a demographic perspective of the hockey ecosystem or other sports? I know you're getting into multi-sport now too. Is it a core group that's already there that has a certain expertise? What is the criteria and what does it have to look like for you to greenlight a new academy?
Well, first and foremost, just like anything, right? It always starts from the top. So having that connection from a philosophical standpoint of view with either the owner of the facility or the management company of the facility, or if it's with an athletic or sport leader, right? So connecting and obviously them having a very deep understanding of the model and what's all entailed with it. So that's really step one. The next step is to take a look at the marketplace. For us, it's been the easiest entry into a new market when hockey is the lead, right? Just because we know hockey, we know it inside and out and have very good, strong relationships in the game. So that's the second piece. If there is a good, solid, deep hockey market and a demand, for the academy model, that's another great box for us to tick. At the same time, we've been spending a lot of time taking a look at soccer, right? 3 million plus 18 and under players across the country. Same with baseball, softball, volleyball, and lacrosse. All great sports, that have great student athlete opportunities at the collegiate level for the kids. And again, parents love to see if they have the option. Again, it doesn't matter if it's Division 1, 2, 3, or club. I think a lot of parents see a lot of value in their sons and daughters participating at some level of athletics when they decide to make that jump into college.
And certainly the landscape now looks quite different than the landscape when we were coming up in the game. I mean, it was a lot more seasonal back then. There was a lot more time to just be a kid. I don't know if academies even existed. I certainly had never heard of them back then. And then obviously the path to make it in the game is different. And I mean, arguably it's a lot harder than it was when we were coming up. I guess two questions there. One is just putting Total Package Hockey and TPH Academy aside. What is your assessment of the state of the game, and then bringing that back around? Where does your footprint of activities fit into all of that? What's its role in the path for kids and families?
Another really great question. So for me, it was interesting, and I actually struggled with this a little bit as a father. My daughter's a sampler, meaning she played in the band, she played the sax in the band, she played basketball, she played softball, and then got involved in track and field as well. And she just loved going from activity to activity to activity, which I really struggled with because all I ever wanted to do was be a hockey player, right? And it was really challenging sometimes, because she was a really good, strong softball player, and I thought she could play at collegiate at some level at some point if she decided to pick that as her sport. But she never picked a sport, to her credit. And I was able to keep, I think, my mouth shut for as long as as long as possible. But I think letting your kids follow their passion, what they're most interested in, is key. And it can be really tough because, again, I'll just talk specifically to hockey. Our parents, I think, in youth hockey, they see and feel this pull into having to have this crazy travel schedule, right, throughout the course of a winter, and then go right into the spring. And when the kids get older and they start to hit the USA hockey tryouts and everything else, when you actually look at the intensity of the schedule, it's actually in the spring. When if you're on a team that goes all the way to nationals, and then you go right into USA hockey tryouts and all these other things, and perhaps you hit junior and you got USHL camps, North American League camps, OHL camps, it can be a pretty big grind. So I think just listening to your son or daughter, and if they enjoy playing soccer or baseball or softball, and I know it's easy to say, like everybody gets on a podcast and say, yeah, play multiple sports, and it's easy. But when you see their friends playing spring hockey, that's something that's extremely difficult to do. But I think listening to your kids, I've seen a lot more kids get burnt out from their parents pushing them or not recognizing that maybe they needed a summer or a spring off versus thinking they're stuck on the hamster wheel of having to keep going. We talk to our parents a lot about athletic training, right, in the spring and the summer, that's far more important. You pick up the gear and you go to that summer tournament on a July 4th weekend that we're coming up on, and instead of, you could be taking that same time and spending it in the gym, working on your speed or your strength or conditioning instead. So I think it's really tough. I know it's easy to get on something like this and just talk about it, but I had a really awesome conversation the other day about Bob Mancini with USA Hockey, and his son Victor is a prime example, Jason. He just won an American Hockey League championship with Abbotsford. He had the most ice time on his team, played 30-plus games in the National Hockey League this year. Like, Bob, it's a really interesting path. And he didn't make the Falenka team. He didn't play on the World Junior team. Like, he didn't hit a lot of these things that a lot of parents think, well, I got to do all of this to be on that path. And he's just, frankly, he's like a poster kid for just listening, letting them play other sports, and letting the kids develop on their own timeline. Because as you and I both know too, so much is tied to genetics and athleticism, and some things that are completely, out of our control.
It's something I want to push on, though, because it's funny. Some of these elite player development people that I've been talking to, they seem so confident in their work that they're like, I could turn, like, give me any ball of clay and I will make it a champion, right? And I actually wonder about the role of nature and nurture. Obviously, it has a big role, right? But how much can you counter that with work ethic and smarts? And also, how much of that work ethic and smarts is either innate to you or can be taught, right? I'm asking that about hockey, but like I have just as many questions about that just as a dad, trying to set my kids up for success in life.
Yeah. The number one word I love that we use in TPH probably every day is compete, right? And I think the sooner we can put our kids in situations where they have to compete for things, and it can even be in the classroom, right? It can be in robotics. It doesn't matter what it is, but provoking that a level of compete in our kids is to me is invaluable and by far one of the most important skills or character traits, right? That we can ever hope for in our kids. And so that's something we talk about at the academy on a daily basis, and same with on the hockey side. But I think when we're trying to figure out how to maximize what God has given us, right? That's where a lot of folks think, yeah, I can change this and that. And I think you can teach hockey sense. I think that's something that's, been argued time and time again, but I do believe there's ways to teach hockey sense and kids can learn and develop that. I believe that is a skill. But I think at some point in time, it's, I can't just jump in a pool today and be a great swimmer. I think getting reps and maximizing what our parents have given us from a genetic standpoint, we all have a ceiling, and it's just a matter of what kind of training and then the time and the reps. But to me, that comes back to the love and passion. You have to have a finger on the pulse of that, because it doesn't matter if they are the greatest athlete in the world, if they're not motivated, right, to put in the time and the work in that particular sport, it's not going to matter unless they're excited to do.
So I want to come back to your comment about your daughter being a sampler. When it comes to the academy model, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you probably get a fair bit of calls from parents who say, hey, it's great that we're honored that we have the potential to, send our child to one of your academies. We're really wrestling with whether it's the right fit. How do you know if it's the right fit? And if you're a sampler by nature, does that mean by definition it is not the right fit?
Well, I think especially with most traditional schools, I think our setup, even more so today, provides opportunities for kids to not, that they may even have that little bit of sampler in them. And I'll just talk to our Nashville campus, for instance, and we have some phenomenal campuses all across the country, but our classroom space is actually in a fitness club. We had a young man that plays water polo. Guess what everybody else in the academy learned how to play? Water polo. So we have kids, they can swim once a week if they want during what we would call, what you and I used to have as recess, which a lot of schools don't even have recess anymore, right? Our kids are out playing soccer or flag football or even just throwing a football around on the turf. So our academy model actually lends itself to the kids developing more athleticism, because we have these other elements and other sports that are available to them that they can do during their recess time or during some of their downtime. And we even have, a couple of student athletes that are still, perhaps they're playing hockey and baseball and they're able to actually get the sport-specific training in for both sports. Whereas perhaps, that might be more of a challenge if they were in a traditional setting.
And if you look across the footprint of, I think you said it's going to be 25 academies coming into next year. You mentioned the Tim Hortons analogy. Is it philosophically, when it comes to development, is it consistent from location to location, or does each one have the independence to put their own stamp on it?
Yeah, I think that's really important. Obviously, we have structure, practice plans, videos, drills, all those things are there for our leaders to use as they best see fit, because they're the ones, just like us as parents, we know what the push and pulls are going to be with our kids, right? Versus someone that doesn't know them as well as we do. So we definitely leave that flexibility to our local leaders and think that's very important. Again, maybe a young lady didn't get in the night before because she had a travel tournament and didn't get back on a Sunday until 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, she walks in the door on a Monday maybe a little later start, but our leader recognizes that today is not the day to be doing a bunch of conditioning, right? So you got to leave that kind of flexibility up so that our leadership on the ground that know these student athletes very well and are with them 4 or 5 days out of the week to use their best judgment as well from a development standpoint. When some of the days are that, hey, really push and really dig in and maybe add some work. And then some other days where maybe it's more of an active rest day because they need to, recover, and making sure they get home at a decent time and get a good night's sleep is the best thing for them on that particular day.
If I were a parent who was debating going the academy route versus going prep, for example, what are the biggest differences between, going to one of these TPH Academy facilities or going the prep school route?
Are you talking just specific to hockey or any sport?
I think specific to kind of the whole picture. And it could be hockey, it could be another sport. You mentioned that academics is paramount and that you put a lot of time and attention into it. So should we think of the academics as the same across an academy versus looking at a prep school, or is it different? And if it's different, how is it different? And then same thing with the hockey, or to be honest, anything else that you think is a notable difference that people should be aware of and either really resonate with and gravitate towards or self-select out?
Yeah, I don't think you can ever really argue. Typically, I don't think you can ever argue, and I'll say Northeast prep schools, right? Like in your neck of the woods. I don't think you can typically ever argue academics and lifestyle, or campus life actually is a better way to put it. You have phenomenal campuses. The education is second to none. I think what our model provides, Jason, that's super key is a balance. That kind of used to be the path back in the day, right? To Ivy, right? Or to a NESCAC school, that prep path. Whereas I think what our model does is you don't have to sacrifice one or the other. I think it provides it's meaning you can work on your athletic and personal development as much as you do on your academics, and one or the other isn't going to cost you that academic opportunity. Quite frankly, and you experienced this, you got to where you got that opportunity in hockey because you're a good hockey player. So in a lot of instances, well, obviously what we've seen over the past 20 plus years is when these student athletes maximize athletic development, that's actually what unlocks the academic opportunity that they probably wouldn't, or maybe wouldn't have got if they didn't have that differentiating factor. So I'll even use my daughter as a prime example. She will be going into her sophomore year at Case Western, and we saw 30 different campuses across the country, and we're trying to figure out if she was interested in going to all these different schools and had some really great scholarship opportunity and offers. Well, she got invited to go to Case Western as an official visit with the track team. So my wife and I, we actually let her go up on her own and just do the visit on her own. And so guess the one school, right? We don't go and visit the campus. She decides she wants to go to school at, which was...
That's probably just because she felt like that was the one where she felt like it was her decision.
Probably, yeah. Mom and Dad weren't there asking questions, right? She ran her own show. But yeah, I mean, being from a rural town in Alabama and her wanting to get into engineering, but also throwing the javelin a good distance, we believe, opened up that door. And I'm almost embarrassed to say I hadn't heard of Case until, our daughter was interested in it. And she loves it. It's, a phenomenal time. But being involved in throwing javelin is what unlocked and opened her eyes up to an incredible school. So that's where, just to kind of close the loop on that, that's something we stress because we have student athletes going into the Ivies, into NESCACs, getting into Michigan, like some of the top academic institutions in the country. And they're not just getting in as athletes as well. So our academics are preparing them and helping them gain admission into top institutions in the country.
So last question on the topic. You mentioned that genetics has a big role to play, so size and compete and things like that. How do you balance? So let's say the kid is super passionate about the game. How do you balance, as a parent, giving the kid every opportunity to pursue their dream with realism if they don't have the genetics, or they don't have the level of compete, or they don't have the skill, or they don't have the work ethic, right? Where you aren't putting too much pressure on athletics to do a job that your kid's athletics isn't realistically going to be able to do.
Yeah, again, I think that's just part of being a parent and making sure that we're listening to what they want, not what we want. And just recognizing that. And I think, obviously, again, like the NHL draft's a prime example. We're celebrating all the players that have worked their butts off. Like what they've accomplished puts them in such an incredibly elite category, right? Just being selected, being drafted. And we celebrate our Division I commits, right? I don't think we spent enough time celebrating our Division II, our Division III, and our club hockey, student athletes. So I'll give you a great example. The Tier 1 AAA program down here in the Southeast, a bunch of our players years ago really revived the University of Georgia club hockey program. Because as you know, most of the kids, the students are running those teams. And now the program is just popping. Hopefully one day we'll see them make the jump to Division I. So I think number one, Jason, is let's celebrate our kids moving on to college and playing at any level, right? Because it's going to be a healthier lifestyle. They're going to stay more engaged. They're going to have to manage their time a lot better than just a student that's just going to school for just academics. So I really think recognizing and being realistic with your son or daughter's aspirations and their commitment levels. But again, I think if there's ways to provoke that compete, because that is one thing that taking that into college. And if they don't play any sports, that level of compete hopefully helps them push themselves from an academic perspective.
So it sounds like I can be on board with all of that. It sounds like maybe the unhealthy piece is when parents, it isn't even the going into debt to make it a reality if you believe that it's going to set your kid best up for long-term happiness and success in life and give them experiences and friendships and help them reach their fullest form in the sport they love and it's what they want to do. Okay, great. I think the unhealthy part is like, hey, I'm doing this as an investment to drive towards that scholarship.
Absolutely.
And because I think that's where things can just get unhealthy, because then, the kid isn't the kid anymore. The kid is a business decision.
Absolutely. And actually, I just was talking to a good friend of mine that's an actor 2 weeks ago. And I'll never forget him telling me that he would have to go from audition to audition. And literally, you go to one audition and get told how terrible you are and how horrible you are. And you have to regroup, pick yourself up, walk around the corner, and go to the next one and give it your all to be able to try to earn that job so that you didn't have to keep bartending. And I think that's a prime example. And he's like, Bo, like sports, like that's what I got taught through playing football. He played, university football. That's what sports teaches us. And that's where the parents, we have to take a look and realize, like, all of these things, and it hurts us so bad, right? When our kids hurt, when they get cut from a team, or the coach doesn't play them, or a kid on the other team makes fun of them, or whatever the thing is, right? It kills us. It hurts us to our core as a parent when we see that happen to our kids. But Jason, I think this is one of the best things that my parents did for me, was they never, ever talked to the coaches. Even at a young age, at 10, 11, 12 years old, I got told, don't come home and complain. You got a problem, you go talk to your coach about it. And I think that's the best piece of advice that I could give parents. I think it's important for, our kids to learn that, right? Because I'm pretty sure we're not going to be able to call their bosses up one day and be like, why has my daughter not gotten a raise yet? And so I think those are the skills, those are the kind of experiences, as much as they tear our heart out sometimes as parents, if we can maintain that discipline to help coach our kids and give them that kind of advice, again, that's how we're going to build leaders and strong, confident, independent young men and young women.
And it sounds like you, even if you just look at like how far people make it in the sport, some of the stats we were talking about earlier, that TPH Academy is producing some really promising players that are going far in the sport. One of the things I've been looking at is the best development paths. And obviously everyone's path is different, but, growing up, for example, you might have done a couple practices a week, and then it was a lot of free play. It was a lot of street hockey, for example. It was a lot of pond hockey, for example, and largely it's just harder to come by these days. And then you look at the specialization and the spring and summer hockey, and then it's like, well, every kid is different, but it's like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And how do you know? And then you look at like, well, why is it 80% games and 20% skills? It should be 20% skills and 80% games. It should be 80% skills and 20% games, right? And then it's like, well, it depends what you mean by skills, because if it's just standing and shooting and getting better and better form standing and shooting, like that's not a game situation. So actually, when you put that kid in the game, they might have a really hard shot, but it's never going to get off, right? Or when it gets off, they're not going to know how to shoot off balance or things like that. And then it's like, well, you got to look at video and you got to isolate, and hockey IQ can be tough. And so it's confusing for me to try to sort through like, the latest on what is the best development path. And I understand it's kid specific, but I'd love to get your take either with your Nathan hat on or with your TPH Academy hat on of just how you think about those trade-offs and the right development paths, the wrong development paths, and how to personalize those development paths for each kid and family.
So I don't really believe there's a lot of right or wrong. I believe that we as parents make the best decisions for our kids that we think at that time. And sometimes do our kids maybe need a little encouragement or kick in the butt to get out and maybe put some work in or do some things? Absolutely. And I'll talk to my son as an example. He'll be 15 here in a couple months, and he's not into sports, and that's okay. We have a lot of fun doing a lot of other things, and I thank God, because he's opened my eyes to so many other different things that I probably never would have experienced if he wasn't interested in and wanted to get involved with. And
what's one cool one? I don't want to derail you, but what's one cool one?
He loves to travel and see different places and loves planes. And so I travel obviously a lot with work. So sometimes the last thing I want to do is add another trip or something like that. But he likes going and checking out, new places. And so that's been great, because I wouldn't have been or we turned a work trip right into sightseeing in New York or something like that, which is cool. We love Boston too, by the way. Absolutely love Boston.
You probably come and do all the things that I've lived here my whole life and I've never done.
Exactly. Yeah.
The duck boat and the Freedom Trail and yeah. But I'm sure the same would be true for me if I came to Alabama.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you go right to the Space and Rocket Center.
But anyways, back to how there's not a lot of rights and wrongs.
Yeah, and so like for him not being involved in sports, we all know, again, how important being physically active is, right, for our health. So just this year, right after school, I'd pick him up from school and we'd go straight to Planet Fitness. And, he kind of complained maybe a couple times to start, but afterwards, I figured out he was always hungry, so I needed to make sure he had a little snack, going into the gym. But now it's just become like routine for us, and it's something we bond over, and it's been an incredible experience and a lot of fun. And thankfully too, I needed to get my butt back in the gym, right? So he's also forced me to get back rolling. So I think, again, figuring out how to help motivate them to get into something else, or maybe to try, some other things. But again, I think just listening to them and understanding what motivates them. And for our kids, Jason, we hear this all the time at our academy, is they love it. They can't wait to go to school. We have kids that struggled with B's and C's that are getting straight A's or A's and B's. And it's because they needed maybe a little bit more attention. They maybe needed a different environment. We're going to continue to see the whole micro school model, I think, explode across the country. And that is awesome to hear that, right? That we hear kids are just pumped to come to the academy because they're going to get to do something that they love to do. And I got to do these other things. And by the way, that's where the accountability comes in, because If they fall behind at all from a schoolwork perspective, they're not allowed to train. The training, the ice, the floor, the turf time gets taken away until they bring, their pacing or their grades to an acceptable level.
And it sounds like you've got an inclusive environment and that you've focused on the love, but then within that, there's a kind of a subset where you've got these prospect teams and things like that that are focused on the more elite players. Are there times where you're taking a kid with talent and you're trying to get him to work harder? And are there times where you're taking a kid that works all the time and it's like, hey, you've got to dial it back because I think you're going to burn yourself out? Or do you really let the kid just set the pace?
Both. Like, and again, because all of us, even you and I, right? Every once in a while, we need a little kick in the butt, right? Or some extra motivation. I've got my TPH St. Louis hat on today, and I think your question actually fits in really well with them. They take just as much pride, and they just had a young man go in the second round of the NHL draft that played at Michigan State last year. And, but they take as much pride of kids that are a single A level, that train and work their butt off and they get cut and then all of a sudden they make the double A team. And the same thing of a double A player that get cut and then finally make a triple A team, right? Like it's just celebrated. But what the key there is what's celebrated is the work ethic, the passion and the commitment, right? Because those players just keep trying, show up, put the work in every day at the academy. And obviously it's awesome when they get rewarded with what they're trying to work towards.
And then what about the role of technology? I'm early in, I come from I'm not a technologist, but I've built technology companies my whole career. And now I'm looking to come in and figure out how to apply that in the sport. And my sense is that technology is infiltrating, and you've got the huddles and instats and live barns and pixelots and sport logics and 49ing is one that I just heard about recently, and there's more popping up every day, and they're starting to infiltrate and play a bigger role. I think hockey might not be as far along, and again, this is just an initial impression, I might be wrong, as some other sports like a golf, for example. And some of that might be because it's just harder, for example, to have the computer analyze hockey IQ, where there's so much art and taste that goes into it, than it is to analyze a golf swing where you're standing in the same exact place and like shooting the same exact way, right? And then some of it might also be like maybe the hockey community is a little more resistant to tech, and for whatever reason. What are you seeing in terms of the sport overall? And then what is your perspective with your TPH Academy hat on?
So I'm going to give you an athletic answer to that question, and then also an academic answer. And I'll give you the academic first. I am so thankful for ed tech companies because utilizing technology is now, this goes back to my comment earlier, that kids don't have to choose. I don't have to go to that prep school and get that crazy education because I want to go to an Ivy school, right? It can do both in today's world. Correct. And the fact that you can bend the student athlete's passion, right? If it's a sport, maybe it's playing a musical instrument, it's acting, whatever it is, but you can bend that passion. You can bend the academics around that passion story versus the traditional schooling system and what you and I grew up in. We had to be in school from 8 a.m., 4 p.m. every day, and we had to either go to lessons maybe in the morning before that or get a workout in before that, go to school, and then do our club teamwork after that. And that has now completely changed. So because of technology, we know that training within 2.5 hours of waking up when our body temperature is at its peak is how we can try to maximize our athletic development. And again, if we maximize our God-given athletic abilities, that's going to, help hopefully open up a door academically. So from an ed tech perspective, super grateful. The whole AI thing with ed tech is another conversation, but are kids learning how to effectively use, I'm in my daughter's ear, biomedical engineering, right? I'm in her ear, AI. Did you use it today? Like, did you just mess around with it? Because those of us that learn how to utilize it, right? and develop it as a skill will benefit down the road. So that I think is a key piece, because you take a look at some of the top academies, in the world, maximizing both athletic training time and not sacrificing the academic side is critical. And thanks to technology, our student athletes have the ability to max both. On the athletic side, I think we're in some incredibly interesting times. I've always had a very deep admiration for soccer. I think soccer is and football. I think soccer and football are so far ahead from a technology and data utilization standpoint. You look at how hard it is for soccer coaches, right? They have to get these certain levels of certification, right, to coach pro, to coach youth. So, but I think the way that those sports have adopted and embraced technology is something to behold. And I think a lot of hockey folks, it takes a little bit more time to adapt tech and to adapt change. Obviously, teams at the national hockey level and some of the other professional and collegiate levels that have a staff or have the resources to invest and pay attention to the inputs and how the data is being used, kind of differs across the board. But, I think there's some companies and there's some technologies that are out there that are hopefully going to help change that. A good friend of mine, Dr. McGregor, has been working with the U.S. National Development Team program, worked with NHL teams, Big Ten programs. He's got a skate sensor right now that he's putting on teams, and it's incredible the data that is coming off of that skate sensor.
Did he make it, or is it a company that he's working with?
It's I think perhaps it's a little bit of both. He'd be definitely you would enjoy talking with him, and I'd recommend you have him on your show here. But
I'd love to.
He's because he's gone through it too with his own son and daughter as well, so he's got it from a perspective of a professional and in what he does every day, but analyzing, again, it's taking that data and then figuring out how we use tech, how we use algorithms, everything else to spit out what we can then use, so that for those of us like myself, how do I comprehend the analytics that are coming off Doc's skate sensor, and how can I best train and develop and plan my entire season to maximize each athlete's performance, to then again, ultimately, obviously at the levels he's dealing with, they have to win.
Do you have areas, if you look across the kind of the purview of player development, and I mean, I'll ask this for hockey, but it could be for any sport, but hockey is what seems like what both of us think about the most, but where you think technology could play a bigger role than it's playing today? Like, where's the fruit the ripest?
Well, at the highest level, I think there's a little bit of a correction going. I think, I think there was a period of time there was perhaps an overemphasis of data use. I think having data is critical. I think it's super important. I think it's helpful. But in the sport of hockey, until you figure out how to measure this right here, right, the heart and the level of grit, which I don't think we're anywhere close to measuring that, I think that's where you still have a gut element. So I think utilizing the data is extremely helpful, especially whether it's injury prevention, right, or workload management. I think all of those things are positives and very helpful. But I think with hockey, I think it's just tough. It's such a unique sport with the level of aggression. There's never been two hockey games ever played the same, right? And it's I think it's one of those sports that will always you have to maintain that balance, I guess, between science, data, and just understanding and knowing the men or women that you're working with.
How much do your academies lean on video, and in what way? And if this is getting too much into the weeds, we don't need to go here.
No, I love it, Jason. That's Brandon Rado, the head coach of Michigan, who is by far one of the most brilliant minds in the game today. And what he's achieved in such a short period of time in Michigan is just speaks to who he is. And His ability to, though, connect on a personal level with the athlete is his special gift. A lot of coaches know the X's and O's, right? But that ability to connect with your players is what's ultimately going to help you win. So I think he's a prime example of utilizing, understanding the kind of team you have, using both of those to maximize wins and performance. So what NARD did is implemented video that we showed video every day before the kids stepped on the ice. And that's something we do across all of our academies. So I think the utilization of video is critical. I think a lot of our coaches way too much time on it, meaning the kids aren't going to sit there for a half-hour video session. I think keeping it very short, direct, and to the point. But I think video is one of by far the most powerful tools, doesn't matter the sport, that we can be utilizing to coach and mentor our student athletes. So it's something that we typically do on a daily basis at TPH. A lot of times we'll look at a skill or a certain drill that we want to do on the ice, and then we'll actually show game footage of that skill being successful in the high stress and pressure of a game, so that the kids know we're not just going around cones to go around cones. We're not just firing pucks around to fire pucks around. We're going to go on the ice. We're going to work on these skills and do these things because it can provoke this kind of success in a game.
Yeah, it's almost like one of the things I'm thinking about is a lot of the watching the film, picking out things for each player that they need to work on, and then finding examples of others who are doing that specific thing well, and then finding drills for that player to work on to reinforce and have it ultimately retain to make those changes. Like, all of that seems so manual, and I'm just wondering if technology can play a role across each of those aspects, not to take over because it's still what's in the coach's head, but to save them the time of like hunting for this, hunting for that, hunting for this, hunting for that. It's like they know what they're looking for, but it's like I hate when my daughter sometimes, or either of my kids, they'll be like, "Hey, can you find that really funny video clip from when I was 4 years old and I did X, Y, and Z. I wore this thing for Halloween, and it's, well, I can find it. I would really like to find it, but it's going to take me 2 hours, and I don't have 2 hours to go sort through tens of thousands of photos or videos on my phone and try to find that, right? It's like, but if you could push a button and just have it, right? And so that's kind of how I'm thinking about tech. It's not to replace the coach. It's to make it more efficient. And from what I can gather, there's some platforms that are doing that at the team and coach level. But when it comes to a lot of the individualized player development that's happening, right, it's still highly manual, especially when it comes to the finding clips to address that thing that you specifically need to work on, and then giving you stuff that's relevant to do it right. So I don't know. There's no real question in there other than just like, what do you think?
I've got 2 comments. As you mentioned, there's some really great products out there, some different options. Huddle Instat. Huddle's been involved in football, right? For forever. TPE is another great tool. I know that's what a lot of our teams use, and they actually have player shifts are all broken down as part of that. So if your son played 12 minutes and 32 seconds in the game, he can actually just pop in there, or you can, or his coach could sit him down and just go through that 12 minutes of just his shifts and spend time looking at just his playing time during the course of that game. So I think there are some really great, powerful tools. The cameras are utilizing AI more and more and capturing a lot more than when you and I played in some dark lit rink and in the middle of nowhere. But the second thing, Jason, I was going to share with you is, and this happens all the time now, is the kids will come to the academy the next day and they are so jacked because, that shot or the move that the coach has been working on with them for the last 2 months, they just scored a goal and executed on that last night at their game. And they've got that clip that they picked up. And so that's, again, it goes back to the power, though, of video and the kids realizing that, hey, I look, learn, execute, and then carry that into a game with them is, again, incredibly powerful.
I mean, last question. I know we're coming up on time, but it's just a fun one. You've seen many thousands of players over the years, if not many more than that. And then same thing with coaches. You've seen the good ones, the bad ones, everything in between. When you think from a player standpoint, you say, "Oh, that kid is special." Like, what what does that kid look like? And then same question when it comes to a coach.
From a player standpoint, what that looks like comes in all different shapes, sizes, right? Everything else. I think that, especially in hockey, Jason, I think we make two mistakes. I think we give the really good players far too much credit when they're young, and we discount all the rest of the players far too young. I think that understanding.
I thought that was just here in New England. That's everywhere.
No, that's everywhere. But again, the one characteristic that I see with the kids, and again, it's not always the most talented, right? The number one characteristic I see in those kids is compete and commitment and their willingness to put time and effort into their sport or their craft when the vast majority of their peers are not willing to do it. And I think, though, that goes back to and it's not work for them. They enjoy going to the off-ice shooting cages and just ripping pucks, or they love going to the skating treadmill, or they're the one that's on the ice 10 minutes early because they know the ZAM gets off and they know they can just go out and just rip pucks around for an extra 10 minutes. And I think those are probably the top 2 or 3 traits that we see. It doesn't matter what sport, but those special players. And actually, let me add one more. And, again, I know I'm a parent, but my daughters, I think, always had this, and that's the coachability aspect, but also not afraid to ask questions. You and I were brought up in an era of you do what you're told. There's no asking questions. You go run through the end of the wall and that's what you do.
I try that line with my kids when they ask why, but it doesn't go so well.
You and I better have the answer.
I'm just you don't need to know why. Just do it. Yeah. It doesn't go so well.
Because I don't know why. But I think that's a big piece of it, that the kids that excel, again, that make it to any level beyond just youth, they have bright eyes and they have their ears open and they want to learn. And they're typically strong students, as well. From a coaching perspective, I've been super fortunate. I played for 3 coaches in a row that I don't think I would have ever made junior hockey, and I would have never made college hockey if I hadn't. And all 3 of them were incredibly competitive. Played for Mark Hunter, who runs and is the owner of the London Knights. Scott Musket, who runs and is an owner of the Shreveport Mudbugs and had a very successful career in pro hockey as well. And Brad Drury, who I played for in starting to play for Junior C. And, when you take a look, I think at successful coaches, number one, they have that compete. Number 2, like I was talking about with Brandon Naranjo, they have that special gift of connecting with the person first. All the X's and O's, everything else doesn't matter. When you watch Paul Maurice, right, and you watch the players and how he talks about the players and how the players talk about him, it's not a mistake that they won back-to-back Stanley Cups. So I think, number 1, compete. Number 2, the ability the coach has to connect with his players as people first. And I would say the third part is their ability to communicate. And that's just where you look at a Nick Saban, right, in Alabama. I've always been amazed at how do you manage 80 plus players, but then how many people are involved, right, in managing that football program, but all of those people that all impact that one team. So that coach's ability to communicate with his assistant coaches, his team managers, the media, whatever it is. I think those 3 characteristics are what you see to be a very common thread with the elite of the elite from a coaching perspective.
Great answer. And I know I said last question. This is the real last question. And it's more of a personal one, but you brought in a CEO in the last few years. Neither of us is getting any younger. We're around the same age, but still a lot of good years left, knock on wood. How are you balancing, professional and other stuff? And also within that professional bucket, what kinds of things are most interesting for you today in terms of where you are and where you want to be spending your time?
I don't want to get too deep down this.
All loaded questions. Yeah.
No, listen. I don't believe in balance. Like, I have a lot of respect for people that have great work-life, family balance. But if you ask any, you've lived this yourself, right? Personally, I just don't believe in balance. Like, if you want to do something and you want to be exceptional at it, like, you have to put ridiculous amounts of time into it. And you have to put the amount of time, and you end up sacrificing time with family, and you end up sacrificing time with friends, and you don't get to golf anymore, and you don't do these other things. But obviously, like, do all of us want to spend more time with our family and our kids? 100%. But all the rest of that stuff, I just believe is noise. And I think if you're going to do something and you want to do it at the highest level or perform the most elite level, there's no balance. You have to be very focused and put the time and effort into whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And for us at TPH, Jason, it's real simple. We want to scale our impact. In my backpack, I walk around I've got a letter from a teammate, or a kid I coached, Teemu Teeton, an awesome young man. Actually, he's moving over to Europe, taking his whole family over with his job, extremely successful, played hockey at Cornell, played in the USHL. But he wrote me a letter right before he got married. And one of the things was, he's like, I understand the method to the madness now, because we made the kids wear suits. And, like, we wanted them to learn these skills that we knew were going to extend far, far beyond hockey. So getting those kind of affirmations about what we're doing and the fact that what we're scaling, we have young men and women that are SEALs, doctors, attorneys, financial advisors, entrepreneurs, the whole bit. And that's what gets me out of bed every day and gets me jacked, is how can we help that next young man or young lady wake up every day so pumped to get to the academy and learn these lessons, to learn about competing, to learn about being a good teammate within the classroom with other people. And I might not like them. I might not even get along with them, but I got to figure out a way to get along with them each day, because we know those are the things that are going to carry them. And hopefully they then turn around. And what's kind of cool is now we've got alumni that are full-time within TPH as well. And it is so cool, Jason, because they know what the expectations are. They know what the culture is at TPH. And man, we've had some alumni come in and start their careers off with us. So that's what I love to wake up every day and think about. Obviously, love spending time with my kids. And I want to see my daughter throwing javelin as much as possible up at Case Western and do all those things. But I want to figure out how we continue to scale this model so that we can help families and help young student athletes maximize their potential, whatever that potential may be.
Well, you've got me ready to run through some walls. Well, Nathan, this is such an awesome and also just kind of multifaceted discussion. We covered so much. Is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I did, or any parting words beyond those great parting words that you just gave?
I'd love to ask you, how can we help? How can TPH help you with what you're doing, and anybody that ends up listening to this too? Like, I'd love it for them to hear. I'd love to hear more what we can do to help you with what you're trying to achieve.
Thanks for asking. Right now, I'm so impatient to build, but like I also realize what a long road it is once you anchor. And it actually took me a few months to even come around to anchor in sports. And then within that, it took me a while to then anchor in hockey. I was trying to fight it. So I'm such a crazy hockey dad that it's like, oh, like you're too close to the fire. Like, don't also be a crazy entrepreneur, because I'm a crazy entrepreneur and I'm a crazy hockey dad. Like, don't put those together. Like, that is like, who knows what'll happen. But I've done it. And then within that, it's like, okay, but like, what am I actually going to build? And so I've been finding that I'm gravitating more towards player development, and I've been finding that, if I look at what I have to bring to the table, it's probably around thinking about how technology could help in a fuller way. But I'm very cognizant that there's a lot of really smart people that have been working on this a long time, from the player development perspective, from a coaching standpoint, from a skills perspective, from an agent perspective, from a technology provider perspective, hardware, software, you name it. And it's like, all right, well, I kind of have to be a student of it, right? And And it's kind of weird because like right now I'm just learning, but it's like I'm going to anchor somewhere. And so I think especially if you're a technology provider, maybe you're a little leery because you're like, all right, who's this tech guy that's going to anchor somewhere? Like, I don't want to talk to him, right? But at the same time, like I don't want to anchor someplace that if someone already has covered. Like I want to find a way to anchor where there's actually white space, where it will help all the key stakeholders and where it can help lift all boats. And by personality, like I want to be everybody's friend, right? So that's a long way of saying, I don't know. But if you're interested in what I'm doing and you feel like you have a perspective to share, or you have ideas for perspective you would want to hear on the show, or there's a technology platform I should be getting familiar with, or a certain coach that's really done it right, or any of the topics you hear on the show, just like tell me, because I'd love to learn. And then if you're enjoying the show and getting benefit from it and you have other friends that you think would also get benefit from it, tell your friends. And beyond that, I don't really have any ask other than just a pat on the back every once in a while so I don't feel like I'm crazy, which I'm sitting up here in Vermont by myself. And, my wife's here this week, although she's been out like paddleboarding or whatever. And I'm just sitting here grinding by myself. I have no team. There's no people around. And like, I'm still working founder hours in this beautiful place, right? So it's like back to your whole thing about sacrifice. That really resonates with me. But it's a pretty lonely road, to be honest, especially in these earliest days.
I have a really deep respect for what you're doing. I think it's an incredibly brilliant move to be speaking to as many people as possible. I would highly encourage, as you and I were talking before the jumping on here, I would highly encourage connecting with our incredible leadership at USA Hockey. Pat Kelleher, John Van Beesbrook, Ken Martell, Bob Mancini. I think what USA Hockey has done and accomplished, especially over the last 15 years with Kenny launching the American development model and the impact that it's clearly had on the number of National Hockey League players, right, that we've been able to develop and put into the league, and that's going to continue to grow. But you look at the back-to-back World Junior Hockey Championships that we've won, you take a look at how well we're performing on the world stage. It's really exciting. And again, in my opinion, it all comes from the top. And when you have good leadership and they have a vision and they're not afraid to try different things, make some mistakes, but then also get out there and research what's working in other sports and how we can apply that to hockey. I think we have some really great leadership right now. And that's why I think you see hockey trending here in our country as well as it is. I'd encourage you to get in touch with some of those folks and the U.S. National Development Team program. I don't think there's a better place in the world to go and develop as a young hockey player aspiring to play professionally.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have it on a huge pedestal as a dad. But back to your point from earlier, like, it doesn't matter what I think. Like the kids have got to chart their own paths. But like you, I'm obsessed with the game. And if my kids wanted to one track, I'd be okay with it, but not my choice to make.
Biggest thing is to enjoy the ride, man, because it doesn't last forever, as you know. But I think it's awesome that you have an opportunity to bond with them over a sport that you loved and enjoyed as well. And so just enjoy the ride. And I know it can be tough, and sometimes we want to tap that coach on the shoulder and ask some questions, but I think the more we can utilize sport to teach our kids lessons that are going to carry them beyond when their playing days are over is what matters the most in the game.
Well, great point to end on from a great discussion. So, Nathan, thanks again for coming on the show. Best of luck to you and the whole Total Package Hockey and TPH Academy team. And would love to just keep an open dialogue as I get further along and find some stuff to do together, but much respect for everything that you've built. So thank you.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Jason. Love what you're doing. And like I said, anything that we can do to help contribute. We love to advance things in the game and obviously for student athletes. So thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you for tuning in to the Next. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, and you haven't already, you can subscribe from your favorite podcast player, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or any of the others. We also send a newsletter every week on the journey itself, the new content that we publish, the questions that we're wrestling with, how the platform itself is coming along that we're planning to build for player development, and where we could use some help. And you can find that at thenextnext.substack.com. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.